Good morning and good afternoon to everyone. I hope you can all hear us okay. I would like to welcome everyone on behalf of the National Law School Veterans Clinic Consortium for our second annual boot camp program. And we want to make a special thank you to Hillary Wandler, who was the brainchild behind this wonderful invention a couple of years ago that brought you last year's Boot Camp 2020. And that is available on our website. And a special thank you as well to the Honorable Judge Michael Allen, who you'll hear from shortly, and he'll be introduced shortly as well. We would like you all to sit back and relax and have 3 hours of wonderful programming from our speakers. A special thank you to all of our speakers who are joining us. And also our board of directors that helped to make this possible. And I'd like to turn it over to our president, Matt Wilcutt from Sutton Snipes, so that he can introduce Judge Allen and also say a few words. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle, and welcome to everyone. Thank you for being here today. And it is my honor to introduce our keynote speaker today, Judge Michael P. Allen. He was appointed a judge of the United States Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims in 2017, and they served 15-year terms. Prior to his appointment, Judge Allen was a tenured full professor of law at Stetson University College of Law, where he was also director of Stetson's Veterans Law Institute, and where 4 of those years, he was the College of Law's associate dean. Judge Allen has also served as a visiting professor of law at the University of Illinois College of Law. He's taught courses ranging from civil procedure, con law, constitutional law, the federal courts, remedies, and veterans benefits. Judge Allen has co-written 2 books and over 25 articles and essays, and has been recognized by receipt of several awards for his scholarship, excellence in teaching, excellence in professionalism and career development, and has twice been named Best All-Around Professor. Prior to his teaching, he practiced in the litigation department of the Boston office of Ropes and Gray for 9 years. He obtained his bachelor's degree in American history and political science. He obtained his JD from Columbia Law School, where he was a Harlan Fiske Stone Scholar the last 2 years. Judge Allen is a frequent speaker among professional legal groups, and prior to his appointment, he testified before both houses of Congress. So with that brief introduction out of the way, I want to also add, I spoke to 2 groups as some deep background on Judge Allen, and one of those groups was attorneys that appeared before him now, and the other were law professors who knew him before his appointment. And I asked the first group, attorneys that appeared before him now, what should students know about Judge Allen? And the first thing, or the 3 things that came out were be honest, be reasonable, and don't bring squishy arguments. And I think all of that would be well encapsulated by taking a look at his decisions and his oral arguments that are recorded. If I could point out to my favorite, yes, there's favorites, Monk v. Wilkie, which also deserves a shout out to the Yale Law School. But that's an argument, or that's an example where Judge Allen is teasing out, he can't shut off that lizard part of his brain of being a law professor in the Socratic method. And he's teasing out hypothetical after hypothetical after hypothetical. And it just is a really great example of the kind of judicial process that he goes through in coming to his decisions and helping to educate others as well. And then when I talked with law professors who knew him before his appointment, informally, they said, 1, ask him for stories about monkeys. Not sure what that was, but I'll leave it to him. And they look forward to anytime he's able to pop in a pop culture reference. So they love that. But professionally, he was well regarded as one of the role models for other law school faculty. He's been invested with his students' projects, involved in moot court. He made himself available as a mentor. And he would go above and beyond for the health and wellness of his students. So he's an example for all of us to be following, whether you're law faculty or in private practice like myself. I suggest students check out the foreword that he and former Chief Judge Robert Davis co-wrote for the 2020 Stetson Journal of Advocacy in the Law. There's some great insight into why he's so well regarded in the teaching and veteran benefits area. And I've only had one interaction with him personally, but what he gave me to take away from that conversation was that he has a love-hate relationship with technology. At least he did at the time. This was several years ago, pre-COVID. And because we know we can look forward to 11 years of more Judge Allen and his decisions and oral arguments, I imagine 2030, when the secretary is trotting out Secretary Bot 2.7, it might be Judge Allen that caused some gears to grind or some qubits to flip in its predecessors. So may he never drop that Socratic method from his judicial process, because we practitioners, law faculty that use him as an example, and students, we're all the better for it. So with that said, I'm going to turn things over to His Honor. It's my great pleasure to introduce Judge Michael P. Allen.
Well, thank you, Matt, for what a wonderful introduction. I've never actually been called a lizard to my face since I've become a judge, so I actually take that as a exceedingly high compliment for myself. You know, I'll tell you, your comments about lawyers made me think of a funny story that happened shortly after I took the bench, which is that, you know, I like to think of myself as a relatively affable, easygoing guy, but, you know, that's because I don't appear before me. And so I also have learned, since I'm a judge, that I really wear my emotion on my face. I mean, you can tell what I'm thinking, and I can't control that. And so early on, I had an interaction where a lawyer just simply wasn't answering a question. And I kept asking and asking and asking. And I finally said, you know, this is only going to get more uncomfortable for you, because I'm going to continue to ask this question until you answer it. And when I went downstairs to my chambers after the argument, one of the law clerks yelled out, not knowing I had come in, "God, I hate it when Dad gets angry." So, so it is an interesting thing. Well, I am so glad to be here virtually. You know, I do get terrified, as Matt says, by technology. I mean, I fight very hard, but I had an early experience on the bench where my law clerks convinced me to bring my computer up on the bench, which I did. And then it started to power down and power up automatically, which was fine, except it was also making a noise, which convinced Judge Greenberg, if you know Judge Greenberg, that his cell phone was making that noise. But it wasn't, but it was under his robe. So while I'm desperately trying to turn my computer off, Judge Greenberg is reaching in his robe, and Judge Davis is presiding and is looking at both of us like we're totally insane. So I have very good reasons for not liking technology. But that being said, I'm really happy to be here for this event today. And basically what I'm going to do is I've got sort of two goals here. One is I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we do at the court, how the court fits into the system, which hopefully you'll understand more as you go along. And then I really want to talk about why what you do is really so important here, both for the people that we all serve in one form or another, the veterans and their families, but also important for you personally as a lawyer to be. So to first, let's put this into some context. The Department of Veterans Affairs is massive. It is a massive entity. And you can think about it at its massiveness, either in terms of its budget, which is now north of $250 billion a year, or the size in terms of the number of employees, which is now getting close to 500,000 employees. And so that's second in the US government only to the Department of Defense. So it is a massive, massive enterprise. And so that is not to excuse some of the issues you'll see in terms of delay and perhaps inefficiency, But you do have to put into context that this isn't like, working at the 7-Eleven where there's 2 people there, right? I mean, this is a massive entity. And you can think of it in 3 chunks, if you will, 3 parts of the VA. This is a little simplistic, but it's not all that simplistic. One part is the National Cemetery Administration. That really is quite descriptive. It manages all the national cemeteries except one, and that's Arlington National Cemetery. Arlington National Cemetery has its own government entity that manages Arlington. But other than that, all the national cemeteries around the country are managed through the National Cemetery Administration. Second one is the Veterans Health Administration. This is a huge part of the VA. Obviously, we see this in the news a lot. It's the largest what's called integrated health network in the United States. It may be the largest in the world, but there are some countries where we can't quite tell. But it's huge. It includes hospitals and outpatient clinics and walk-up clinics, and they're all over the United States. There's over 1,000 of these places. And then the third part is the Veterans Benefits Administration. So in most of what you're going to do, you'll probably interact with the Veterans Benefits Administration within VA. And what that does is just what it sounds like. It manages all the benefits that VA has outside of the healthcare context. And so that ranges from the most common is disability compensation, but there's pensions, there's home loan guarantees, there's life insurance, there's GI bills. I would be willing to bet my house, which I can easily do because I'm renting right now, but I would still bet my house even if I owned it, that somebody on this call today is receiving some benefit through the Department of Veterans Affairs. I'd be really shocked if that wasn't happening. And so these 3 enterprises make up VA. And all of them, to some degree, all of them administer a benefit in a way that somebody can be unhappy with what they do. I want to get service connected because I hurt my knee and I think it's related to service, and VA says no, right? Or I want to get a reimbursement for non-VA emergency healthcare, something because of one case I know a great deal about. That's administered through the Veterans Health Administration, and you might be unhappy with that. And you might be unhappy, for example, with something administered through the National Cemetery Administration, something from as major as getting a place in a national cemetery to I want to get a flag. For example, National Cemetery Administration handles that. And until 1989, any of those decisions, and prior to this time, it was called the Veterans Administration. Everybody still calls it. It was elevated to a cabinet department in 1988. But prior to 1989, none of those decisions were reviewable outside the VA. You could appeal those decisions up to the highest entity within the Department of Veterans Affairs, the Board of Veterans Appeals. But until 1989, you simply couldn't go beyond that. And as the Supreme Court and Congress commented in different ways, that was a period of what they termed VA's, quote, splendid isolation. It lived in a world essentially without judicial review. So if you think about administrative law, which some of you may have taken in law school or will take, if you haven't, you should, right? You can't turn around without hitting administrative law in the world. And the idea is, right, a lot of administrative law is shaped because of the interactions between a court and the VA. But if you imagine then prior to 1989, it was almost like the Charles Darwin going to the islands in the Pacific where nobody's ever been, and you've got these creatures that have grown up because there wasn't interaction with the other things like predators, for example. And that was a little bit like what happened when Congress imposed judicial review on the VA. And so what it did is it created something called it enacted the Veterans Judicial Review Act of 1988, which created the court on which I now sit. And as Matthew pointed out, there are, we judges on the court, we serve for 15 years and then automatically become senior judges. There are 9 judges. We were all appointed by the president and confirmed by the Senate. Right now, we have a full court. 2 of my colleagues were confirmed in late 2020, or about August of 2020, Judge Lauer and Judge Jaquith. In the weird world of the pandemic, I have still met neither one of them in person, actually, but I do believe they exist because I've seen them on computer, right? And so if you've seen it on the internet, it must be true, and I sort of feel that way on Zoom as well. So we have those 9 judges, and then we have 4 senior judges who are hearing cases right now on a year-round basis. And so that makes up almost a 10th judge, if you will, because they take roughly 1/4 caseloads. And so we are well staffed. Now, I'll tell you, we operate just like any other appeals court. So we are a court of appeals. So we don't, to the extent you're relatively new to the law, don't think of law and order in the courtroom, right? There's not going to be a jury box. There's not going to be witnesses testifying. So what we do is we hear appeals based on briefs and records that are developed before the agency, because that's fundamentally what we do. We review final decisions of the Board of Veterans' Appeals. Right? And so we don't make factual determinations. We review their factual determinations. We don't make policy. We just make sure that what they do isn't arbitrary and capricious. And so all of the things you've learned in law school or will learn about appellate decision-making applies to the court as well. And there's an important difference. At the VA, at least on paper, and we can debate how much this is true on the ground, but the VA system is non-adversarial. So it's not as if there are government lawyers on the opposite side in the traditional way that you'd think. But once you get to the Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims, it's a normal adversary process. So there's a whole section in the Office of General Counsel at the Department of Veterans Affairs that is their entire existence is doing appeals before the Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims. And don't think of a small office. There are now above 100 lawyers, I think getting close to about 120 lawyers in just that one part of the Office of General Counsel that do these briefs before us. Now, I say we're like a normal appellate court. That's true, except we have some weird quirks as well. One is that Congress, when it created the court, allows the court to decide cases by a single judge. So that is almost, if it's not unique, it is almost unique in the federal appellate system and most state systems as well. Now, our single judge decisions are non-precedential, which means they only bind the parties to the particular case, as opposed to when we sit in a panel of 3 or en banc with all 9 of us. That then binds everybody in the world that touches VA. Now, that is different than normal appellate courts, but it's similar in this way. Most federal appellate courts, like the 7th Circuit if you're in Chicago, or the 11th Circuit if you're down in Florida or Georgia and Alabama, they hear all their cases in 3-judge panels, but most of their cases are not precedential. There are 3-judge panels that issue a non-precedential decision, which actually functionally works very much like our single judge cases, right? So that's one, though, unique aspect of our court. A second unique aspect, and one that we are still wrestling with, and I know for certain that there are people on this call who have touched these cases, is that in 2017, just as I was coming onto the bench, the Federal Circuit determined that we had the authority, the Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims had the authority to issue or to manage and certify class actions at the appellate level, meaning there isn't a class action before the agency, but somebody comes to us either on an appeal or asking us to issue what's called a writ, which is like an order to VA to act because they're acting too slowly, for example, that they could certify a class of all similarly situated people, something that is similar to Rule 23 of the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure. Now, the problem with that is there is, if you remember when you're a little kid and watching Winnie the Pooh, one of the characters in Winnie the Pooh was Tigger. And his first line is he bounces out and he says, "And I'm the only one." Well, that's a little bit like the Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims and Class Actions, because there is no other appellate court in the country that can actually certify a class at the appellate level. And that has been so dramatically challenging because we can't take evidence, for example. Managing a class action after you certify it, and the agent, and they have fights, about, oh, well, you gave me this report to show what you're doing, but it doesn't show this column. Imagine having 3 judges try to manage that, right? People who are lawyers on the call will understand. Oh, it's like you go to a magistrate judge and the magistrate judge says, "Yep, you get this, you don't get that." Having 3 judges do something is, really complicated to have that happen. So we've been trying things out. And recently, in a case called Wolf, where we certified a class, we appointed a special master for the first time to essentially act in that role. And we were very lucky. The special master we appointed was was former Judge Griffith, who sat on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit for 15 years, and he retired. And we asked if he'd be interested in this appointment. And so he has been serving as our special master in that case. So we are an interesting institution. Early in my career, as a law professor speaking to some groups, described the court as a platypus. And I still believe it's like that, meaning, it works as an animal, but it's not one you'd think you'd sit down and design. It's almost like God designed the platypus because he or she had a whole bunch of leftover pieces and said, well, it's a mammal, but yeah, I got a duck bill. Let's slap that thing on too, right? And we'll make it lay eggs. I mean, all of these weird things. It works as an animal, but it's unique. And the court is that way too. We have this whole mix of things. And the last thing I'll just underscore for that is we have nationwide jurisdiction. So there aren't many federal courts that do. And so we hear cases all over the United States. Actually, we travel, or at least we did before the pandemic. It's a busy place. When I joined the court, we had about 4,500 appeals a year. This year, we're going to be just under 9,000. So it's a lot of work. And this brings me to you all, right? Which is, what you're going to do here is so important, whether you're working at the agency or whether you're doing court work. I will tell you, right? If you are trying to go alone in the court, pro se, it is not good for you. I will tell you a secret though. It's better to go alone than to be with a bad lawyer, right? Because if you're pro se, I'm going to look out for you. I actually tell my law clerk, read the materials as if you were going to counsel the client about the arguments to make. I won't do that in a represented case. And so the fact that you are going to be helping under the tutelage of people who are experienced in this area is so important to you, because frankly, on the screen, it says my name is, my title is judge. But in reality, what I am is a professional reader. I do a lot of reading. And one of the skills you're going to pick up is how do you make a written submission that is helpful, not just for your edification. Ooh, I like this, right? But that helps the person who's going to do their job, right? And so you're helping to put together these materials is going to be so helpful to veterans. And it makes a huge difference. I am sure all of your clinical supervisors will tell you stories that they've had personally where they've touched somebody's life through the work that you do, right? But this is a situation in which you're basically going to do well by doing good. And here's what I mean by that, right? Maybe some of you are in these clinics because you've always had a desire to help veterans and their families, and that's what you want to do. Maybe some of you are in this because it's the only thing that fit your schedule and your school requires you to take a clinic, right? But one way or the other, you're in it, right? You're in it now. And so you're going to be able to do well or do good for these people, but you're also going to be able to do well for yourself, because there are things that you're going to get out of this experience that I know are going to be fantastic, right? One of them is, the thing that you think of, which is, and I said the first time, writing the brief, maybe getting to do an argument, putting together materials, right? Yes, okay. But you're also going to get to experience things when people say law school doesn't teach you. This will. Like, facts are messy, right? I mean, facts are really messy. When you sit in a classroom and you read a case that's in a book, it's a case written almost and certainly by an appellate judge like me, where the facts have all been sorted out. Well, when you have to try to put together the facts, it's going to be very, very complicated for you. And then you have to figure out, well, how do these facts fit into this law, right? So many briefs and arguments that I get are almost as if they're written by two different people. One section lays out for me in exquisite detail what the law is, often way too much, right? Because trust me, by the end of your clinic, you're going to know how to establish service connection, the 3 elements. I don't need to be told that in 5 pages, right? But one section is the law, and then it's as if somebody else has written the facts, which is great. But it's the third part that's so important, which is why the facts fit into the law in such a way to lead to a result. That's what I don't know, right? That's what I need your help with as an advocate. And you're going to learn that, the putting together of the record, the writing. You're also going to learn other skills. And you don't necessarily think of these as skills. I think the most important skill of a lawyer, a practicing lawyer, is listening. Lawyers do not do enough listening. They think the most important thing is to ask the question. But a question to which you do not listen to the answer is actually a meaningless exercise. And so sitting down and talking to a client and figuring out how do you talk to a client about something that's difficult for them? How do you talk to a client about something that's difficult for you, right? You're going to have to do that as a lawyer, no matter what type of law you go into. And this is what you're going to learn. You're not going to think of that as a skill you're learning, but that actually is something you're going to learn. And guess what? You're also going to learn that sometimes you have to tell the client no, right? The fact that they get great representation and they have judicial review and all of that does not mean they will win. Even maybe if they should, right? And these are all intangible skills you're going to do. The other thing that I want to stress as I wrap up here is use this as the beginning of your opportunity to guard your professional reputation. Because let me tell you, your professional reputation is something that, frankly, nobody else is going to guard, and you have to. Because it is a resource that once you lose it, it is really, truly almost impossible to get back. And that professional relationship is in how you treat people, how you treat opposing counsel, how you treat clients, right? What do you say when you write in a brief? Because I pay attention to that. And let me tell you, I don't just pay attention to it in a case. Now, it doesn't mean that one party's going to win when they should lose or something like that. But I remember, and judges actually talk about this among ourselves, and not just at my court. I had a bizarre experience recently where I went fishing. That alone should make it bizarre, because I should never be allowed to go fishing. But I went fishing. I happened to go fishing with another judge, a judge who is a magistrate judge here in the Middle District of Florida. We were with a lawyer too, who's a mutual friend of both of us. So we're out on Tampa Bay, and he was telling me about a very bad interaction he had had. And he said, I actually had to hold the guy in contempt. And I said, well, isn't that bizarre? I said, I'm an appellate judge, and I actually had to hold a guy in contempt recently for doing almost exactly the same thing. It was the same person. We had held the same person in contempt for the same conduct. And so my point is, and it wasn't like unethical conduct, it was simply not following orders, not submitting things on time, right? And this is a really important point for you to learn right now from the beginning, is everything you do will amass into your personal, professional reputation, and you have to guard it. And I want to end with one last thing, my final thought. Some people on the call might have heard this, but otherwise not. You are all going to do great things as lawyers. You're going to do great things. You don't know what the hell those things are right now, right? Because if somebody would have told me I'd be sitting here speaking to a computer screen as a judge, right? No, I wouldn't have thought that. But you're going to do great things. Now, maybe some of you will become, the Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Clarence Thomas, Thurgood Marshall, John Marshall, maybe. Statistically unlikely, right? But what I will tell you, though, is I know for certain all of you have the ability to be Tim Keogh. Now, the only people who are on this call who could know who Tim Keogh is somebody who's heard me tell this before. But Tim Keogh was a lawyer in a barn. I don't mean a converted barn. I mean an actual honest to God barn. It had horses in it. He owned a farm, and he also was a lawyer. And one day, this is in a rural town, one day there was an X-ray technician who's driving down the road, and she had massive problems because her husband, who was a UPS driver, had brain cancer and had done all sorts of weird things with the family's finances, and the family's finances weren't good to begin with, and she just didn't know what to do. And she saw the sign hanging outside the barn that said, Tim Keogh, lawyer. And so she went in and she told him the story, and using the skills that he had developed both in law school and over his time in practice, skills that you're going to develop now, he was over the next couple of months able to unravel this process so that the UPS guy was able to die knowing, okay, this is okay. And the X-ray technician was able to go forward. Tim Keogh made as much difference in the world to those people as Clarence Thomas or John Roberts or Ruth Bader Ginsburg made on the big thing. And I don't have to assume that's true, because the UPS worker was my dad and the X-ray technician was my mother. And I am telling you that if that lawyer working in a barn had not done the things he did for them, things that you're going to learn to do this semester, I would probably never have even gone to college, let alone gone to law school and become a judge. And so I want to end with what I consider to be that really uplifting thought, that it's going to be hard this semester and this year as you work through these cases, but it's worth it because it's developing who you're going to be over the arc of your career. So I wish I could have been there all with you in person somewhere, but I'm just so thrilled that we were able to come and virtually get together.
Thank you so much, Judge Allen. That was so wonderful. I know, speaking from all of the professors here, that you just told our students everything we want them to know for the whole semester. So hopefully we can follow up on your remarks and keep reminding them as they learn these skills. We just appreciate you being here so much. So thank you.
Thank you and good luck today.